Hi guys, so it's now day 4 of the renovation project and I'm still in the master bedroom. So what I'm going to try and tackle today is replastering this sill above the window. It's going to be a big job and I've never plastered before, so I'm going to have to learn how to do that as I go. Before I can actually start doing any plastering, I need to remove the lip of the window and then I can start at it. To do this, I'm going to grab my trusty Stanley knife and I'm going to use it to cut through the silicone all the way along the top of the window. So I'm going to do that right now. So now I've removed that bit of the window, I can start plastering. I've never plastered before and I have none of the tools. The first thing they recommend getting is some way to mix the plaster. I'm going to be doing a lot of plastering, so I don't want to just have to do it manually. So I actually bought myself a new tool. This is a nice big Einheil power drill. It's an SDS drill and it'll make mixing up all of the plaster really easy. To go with that, I've got one of these mixing drill extensions. This will mean that I can just mix up all the plaster I need and it won't knacker me out before I've even started putting any on the wall. So now it's time to try and mix my first batch of plaster. For this first job, I've had to go with 2 different types of plaster. The first kind of plaster is the bonding coat. This is going to provide an underlayer or undercoat plaster. This is because I've probably got maybe 20 millimeters of plaster that I need to put onto this wall. And with the finished plaster, you can only put it on in 2 to 3 millimeter layers. That would involve 10 layers of plaster. With the undercoat plaster, I can use layers up to 10 or 11 mil thick. So I think the plan is to do 1 layer of the undercoat and then layer it up using the finishing plaster. So before I actually get to doing any of the plastering, we first need to protect the window and the windowsill underneath. To do this, we'll use some dust sheets or protective liners. I got a pack of 8 of them for about 10 quid, so they're not expensive. We're going to secure this up just with some masking tape along the top here, so we protect as much of the window as we can. So I've completely covered the window and the windowsill. I've masked along the top to make sure that none of it gets onto there accidentally. I'm also replacing the carpet in this room, so I don't need to protect it in any way. But if you're not replacing your carpet, make sure to get a nice thick carpet protector. You can get plastic sheets or even another bit of carpet if you can't get some plastic sheets, but they seem to be pretty cheap. So I don't see why you wouldn't go for that. That'll just help stop any of the plaster that falls on the floor getting trampled into the carpet, because I'm sure it's going to be an absolute pain to get anything out once it's been trodden in. So now we've got everything protected, we can move on to mixing our first batch of plaster. I'm going to try mixing a half bag of the thistle bonding coat, which is the undercoat for here. I'm going to try and lay 1 slightly thinner layer of that, so probably about 6 mil, just to try it out for the first time, and then I'm going to see how that goes and take it from there. So I've got my water and I've got my mortar, I've got my big drill with the mixer on, so let's get started. So I've now mixed it up and it feels like it's about right. Some of it's sticking to the trowel, which is good. So next step is to do some plastering. Let's see how that goes. So it's now about 8 o'clock this evening. I've been leaving this plaster to dry for a while. As you can see, it's still a bit tacky, so definitely needs to dry overnight, and I'm gonna have to do the next coat tomorrow evening. Whilst I've been waiting for that to dry, what I've been doing is going around the floorboards and removing all of the skirting off this room. This is just something that I needed to do, and now it means that I can go and plaster these walls in one go all the way to the bottom where I need to. I think before I end up plastering, I am actually going to remove the carpet from this room because it means I can get easily to the bottom. So it's now actually the morning after, and I'm going to talk you through a couple of things I learned doing my first ever plastering. The first thing I learned is that using a step ladder or something like that to get closer to the working height is so much better than doing it from the floor. Working with your hands above your head, holding up the mortar and using it above your head is just a lot more tiring than you want it to be. The second thing is I probably should have got a slightly smaller trowel. Getting in all those nooks and crannies with the really large tool was a lot of effort, and I definitely could have done a better job if I'd had a smaller trowel. The third thing is that keeping the thickness consistent was really tricky. I ended up going back and looking at it and seeing that some areas were maybe 1 or 2 millimeters thick, whereas other areas were the full 8 or 9, even 10 millimeters. So that was a real struggle for me, but I managed to go back over and get a lot of it fixed. I also learnt that it takes a lot longer to dry than I expected. This means that you've actually got quite a lot of time to go back, change things, adjust it. If it's too thick, you can spread it out a bit. If it's too thin, you can add more on. If it goes over somewhere, you can just come back and clear it up. This is something I'm definitely very glad about, as I don't want to be messing it up, and it gives you time to come back and make sure that everything is really good before it sets hard. The last thing is that my walls aren't plumb. They aren't vertical. So I was trying to have all of the plaster looking relatively vertical, but when you look at it from the side, it definitely isn't. So one thing I'm going to do next time is get some string, some bits of metal or nuts and washers to hang on the end, and I'm going to draw a plumb line and have them hanging over the edge of the plaster so I can see where plumb is. If the whole wall is too far off, then I may have to just account for that and have the whole section of plaster slightly off plumb, but hopefully I'll be able to get the wall plumb and it'll be really, really nice, and that'll just make my life a lot easier. So this evening I'm going to be doing more plastering. I'm going to be putting on the second coat of the undercoat so that it matches up to the same level as the brick that's existing there above. I'm then going to also try and skim one of the walls. This will be my first ever skimming, so hopefully that will go alright as well. If you've got any tips on how to plaster, if you've got any advice or things I can change to make my plastering better, I would love it. So if you let me know in the comments below, that would be brilliant. So if you've liked this video, give it a like and subscribe to get more videos in this series. And hopefully I'll see you next time for more house renovation.